Linda Williams McCune. I used to live here in Morristown. I had an artist in residency position through the Tennessee Arts Commission when I was in my early 20s. That's been about 40-some years ago. This building that I'm in, we started a board of directors for it around the same time I was here in Morristown, and then it's grown considerably as far as their Mountain Makings Festival and so forth. I left Morristown in I want to say 77, 78, and we moved to South Carolina. We lived in the lower part of the state for a good many years, and then moved to Greenville area of South Carolina, where I still am. I'm an academic program director and lead professor in fine arts at Greenville Technical College in Greenville, South Carolina. We have about 1,500 folks coming in the door this fall. We're maybe the largest art department in the state. At least if we are not every single semester the largest, we're at least the second every single semester. So there's a lot of folks I have to take care of, just like when I was here. Okay, I think I taught in just about every school in this county and city when I was here. I would go from first grade then to fifth grade sometime, and then back to Walter State. I taught at Walter State when it was first opened. Now this is my 44th or 5th year college level teaching, so I enjoy that and don't want to quit doing that. Anyway, the pieces that you'll see here at Rose Center are from several series. I work in a series. I start my thinking process by writing. I do probably 2 to 3 weeks worth of what I call gut level writing. I'll just sit down at the computer, used to be typewriter, and just type out everything I can think of that's interesting about the idea. I'm more concerned about the content of the work and whether or not the form supports the content. In my mind, there's no difference between the form the content takes and the content itself. So the works are not paintings about a certain thing, but and especially my sculptures, the form that they take is the form that I mean for the content. So I've been really freed a great deal. And my BFA at the University of Tennessee, met my husband there, and he was from Morristown. That's the reason we moved here to begin with. A little bit later on, I decided that I definitely needed an MFA, and so I went to the University of South Carolina for the MFA. So between the two, I painted here. When I was in Morristown, I saw myself as a painter, and then between those 2 degrees, it was clear that I enjoyed more stretching the canvas than working on it. So I became a person who loved tools, and I have radial arm saws, band saws, table saws. If you give me a ladder and a welder, I'm good to go. So I really, 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 really love tools. So the piece that you see here is from a series I call my Family Portrait series. And Family Portrait, of course, has a long historical journey through history. But my main concern here was that it spoke to the feelings that I had about my children. When I was here in Morristown, early on, my husband and I determined that it would be very difficult to have children, and we lost 5 within, at the 5th month, for quite a few years. And so when my 2 were born, I was almost overprotective, there's no doubt about that. And then as they got a little bit older and I saw that they were needing to develop their own lives and would be gone at some point, I decided that I would work on this piece about that. So if the doors are shut, it actually looks more like a coffin than anything else, and I do feel that that's what happens. If you keep children at home, don't allow them to move and breathe and develop their own personality and life history, they need to be free at some point, and so that's what this basically does. And my daughter Nova, whose name now is Nova Katamatri, lives in upstate New York, and she is a winemaker for Constellation Wine Company. She's a wine director. So she's done very, very well, has a degree from Cornell University in enology and viticulture, which is yeast management by and large. And then my younger daughter is getting her master's in electrical engineering like my husband. She'll be through in December with that degree, and we're really very proud of that master's that she has in engineering. So the 2 of them have done really well, and I've let them go. But what this work was about is how do I do that? And you see this unit that I've painted here with my husband essentially protecting most of us and me just hanging on to him for dear life. They joined at the hips and so forth. So of course that particular picture can't last forever. There's no way around that, and so that's what this work is about. It's a sense of great loss for me when the children left, And I think I needed to, as I do very often, I'll go out to my studio, and that solace that I have out there pulls out all of these emotions, and I work through it with the work. The work that I just showed you, that was the Family Portrait Series, was last shown in Minnesota. I ship work all over the United States every year. The piece that you're seeing right here was last in Salinas, California. There's a very large center there, and it was in a site that talked about basically the rights of women, was what the show was about. But why this piece is so important, it's part of the Natural and Theological Virtues and Vices series. I'm still working on this series. I've done most of the virtues, okay, except for joy. I've had a little issue with that one, and I have not finished all the vices. Anger came really fast and quick, and that work is very large, and it's been traveling a good bit. And no, it's not here in this grouping. But the work that's here talks about generosity. It's the generosity piece of the Virtues series. And what it's about basically are artists who gave more of themselves than they needed to give to be an artist. You can do all your life work that is not about you at all, and work that sells well, and work that has all of these other qualities to it. But I think when a person devotes their own personal history and they're talking about what they know specifically, the work becomes a lot more valuable in my mind, mainly because we as a group, artists as a group, can have an incredible voice as to what's going on in the culture and what the culture is all about. And these artists that I picked to honor on this piece, Kata Kolwitz, Albert Dürer, there's any number of those. All of them were not just artists for the sake of making a print or so forth. What she was talking about was the riots in her country, the terrorism in her country, all the plagues and things that came from the amount of wars in her country. So to me, she gave us more about herself than she absolutely needed to or behooved her as an artist. So of course there's always those thoughts about how much you need to talk about, how much you need to tell about your work, and how do you mediate between that and personal privacy. And I've had all of those issues to think about myself. But at the same time, I'm not willing to cancel myself and what I know about and what things I've experienced in order to make what looks Spanish or what is current in the general populace arena. When you shut these doors, what happens with this piece is it looks very much like a backbone. And that's what it really takes. It takes somebody who's willing to get the back, we say, let's have some backbone. What that really means is how much am I going to put out there and how important is that? And if it's important to you, you have the nerve, if you will, to say it and state it, okay? All of these pieces that are on this, and the doors and so forth, okay, are tools from my studio, okay? I throw them after they get down to the point I can't use them anymore. I throw them in a big box. So these are actually already used tools, mostly sculpture tools, carving knives and things like that. And all of this metal material that you see on here, all this metal material, is actually the flanges that come from casting bronze. I teach aluminum mirror mold casting, and I teach pewter rubber mold casting, and bronze casting. All kinds of casting in my sculpture class. And so when the mold is made poorly, the metal goes out through the mold, and this is what is the waste product. But in my mind, this is just as beautiful as the forms a lot of times that we produce from it. Moving to the same series, Natural and Theological Virtues, and the very first unit that I finished was for the South Carolina Arts Commission's traveling show, which was Thresholds, Art and Spiritual Life. And it traveled to 22 museums all over the South, up and a little bit into the North, and then down as far as Louisiana. So it was out there a long time, 4.5 years, this piece moving. But what we had to do in order to be able to take part in this, the South Carolina Arts Commission picked 10 artists from each state, and there were 5 states involved in it. And I was very lucky, for sure, to get one of the spaces for South Carolina. And then we drew lots for our site-specific place, and I drew the oldest funeral home in Charleston. That was where I was supposed to design a work for that site. And when I went down there, of course, there's the body laying out and the caskets and the beers and so forth everywhere. And I said to myself, what in the world am I going to design for this? So I took my sketchbook down there, and you can see this is kind of what happens when I'm at a site and trying to figure out what to design for it. The longer that I drew, then I came up with, you can see, this plan, which seemed to me to look very much like a casket. It had a lot of options to it. I could incorporate my drawing skill with it. It has a cavity on the inside that has a very large book. I asked my students to take an acid-free sheet of paper and just write down if they had lost anything, loved anything and lost it. It could have been a person, it could have been a tangible item, it could have been an animal, what have you. I didn't edit any of those. Anybody that was willing to participate in the work, I let them do that, and I included it in a large book on the inside. It takes 2 people to operate that book. It's probably 5 feet, and not terribly heavy, but still unwieldy for one person. So I think that's the notion about love. It's very difficult to love if you are very introspective and egotistical, and in general, bent on yourself and not others. So this work is about who gave, how they gave, who they loved, and that sort of thing. This was my study sketch, and then I had to do for them a finished drawing, which is it's called a presentation drawing, a finished presentation drawing, and this is what this drawing looks like. I do a good many of these for public commissions and that sort of thing. It gives me an opportunity to write at the bottom what this work is basically all about, so it stays with the initial study sketch. And also the funeral home in Charleston was a fairly older building. Not necessarily totally Gothic, but had this sort of presence to it here. So this gave them an opportunity to see what I was going to do and how it might fit into that site. These doorways here, you see at the time, I had no idea what was going to be behind them and what drawings would be there. I just knew that this would be the shape for it all. 74 inches and around 3 feet high. It's very narrow. It's got a 12, 16-inch presence on it. And when it was at the funeral home, you see the casket that these folks who were dead and having their funerals at the time was on one side of the room, and then this was on the opposite side of the room. So it had a balance system, a presence about it that supported the weight of the casket on the opposite side of the room. And each one of the doorways, has a word that there's many words in the English language and other languages for love. So each one of these doorways has a different kind of love. And it's described by a drawing in there. I have been for a long time trying to get my drawings and my sculptures together in one work, so I think this one was relatively successful in that. So that made me really excited because I would like to constantly do work that has both those things in it. And you can see the top comes up, the top comes off. Okay, I'll do that much. And there's a book on the inside, as I say. All right, so this one took 520 clocked-in studio hours. I will spend around 10 to 14 hours a week out of my shop. If I've got a show coming up and I know that that's quick on me, then I will spend twice that, okay? And I've always done 4 or 5 full-time jobs, I was a mother for a long time, full-time pretty much, and then of course I've been a wife for all this time. And I do my studio work. I don't neglect that at all. I'm still full-time there, full-time showing, full-time out there. And then I'm as you know, academic program director. I said that, so I do a lot of administrative full-time work, and then I teach full-time. Enjoy a great deal. So this work has one of the doors, talks about teaching and talks about the kind of love you have for your students. So if you shut it like this, you can see that this work has images underneath the door panels. And how that's built is that those are collages and drawings, drawn collages. And then the top has a gel media coat that has mica chips, metal chips in it. So at a distance, when you flip it back up, you can see it turns a little silver. I have a little silver cast to it, and that makes it look better in the light. I've discovered with my sculpture, because of the kinds of lighting that every gallery that I've ever shown in has a different set of lighting, different kind of way that they present things. So with those mica chips and metal chips in the work, the light hits it at such an angle, and it causes the work to have a little bit better glow, almost a glow about it, which has been real successful for me so far. also have Fortitude, which is the huge tower with all the ladders on it. Okay, and that's also part of the same series. Okay. So far now there's 12 in this series, 12 pieces of work in this series. So I have to finish them all, and it probably will take me another about 6 years or so to get all of those pieces finished. I have a website up. It's LindaWilliamsMcCune, all one word, .com, and you can see my archived pieces and some new pieces. I only have one from the Pitt series here, and there are lots of them. I have one from the Obsession Towers, and I have, 5 of these. This one's 14 feet high, and what it's about is the millennium change, which I don't think I'll ever see anything so spectacular in my lifetime as a millennium change. I was excited that I actually lived through that. You remember all the things that occurred, where they were afraid all the computers would crash and whatever. So I got to thinking about what the historians would do with that, what they would think we were doing at the millennium change. So what this really does is it records the first 70 or so people who sent information to me about what they did in their the night of the millennium change, went on the outside, and then everybody that came in later all went into the interior, and there's still 2 slots here that I can still add things in with people who want to do that. This one was incredibly organic, and the last 2 pieces were also the same way. And this is carved concrete. It's called wet carved concrete, and that makes it an incredibly organic presence. Very hard, actually. It looks softer, but it's very hard. And once I finished with this organics, then I started to think about what about the millennium change made so many people so stressed. And I think I started thinking about the stress series, and I've been working on it now since 2005. It took almost 4 years for me to make a list. And I have a list that's probably 6 feet or so in my studio with things that I want to do and dates on them so that I know when they have to be completed. What I do on the stress series, different from the sculptures, is I will do small drawings in my book here, very tiny ones, just to get an idea of what the composition will be. And then I will sit down and do my list, how many of these pieces that I want to produce. I gut level do the writing about it. It'll usually take about a year to figure out all the ins and outs of what I want to say, Then for the drawings, my drawings as opposed to the sculptures, I do these very little small 4.5 by 5.5 study sketches. These may not be the entire work. They may be only just a little portion of the work. But these are done with, the demarcations are done with graphite pencil, and then what I will do is apply washes, sometimes with ink, and then all the line work is done with a nib pen, a quill pen, Dr. Martin's Pen White, and sometimes F&W India ink or Dr. Martin's Star Black. And so that's how they're built. And once I've finished with this, then I can think about doing the very much larger ones. These will take about 16 hours or so, these little small pieces. The larger ones, however, once I've dedicated myself to starting on those, they'll be between, if they're 1 layer, they'll be 75 hours or so. If they're 2, something like 100. The 4-level ones, which all of these pieces in here are all the 4-level pieces, they're between about 150 hours on the drawing. So I can do 3 or 4 a year. I just finished one with this study sketch that you're looking at here. I just finished it. As we speak, after I hung this show, after we came up to hang this show, I was still working on that. Just finished it last week. I'm so excited. It's been in my shop since January. So I was really thrilled to finish that piece. So in some ways, the stress series is a zone out. I go out there and I zone on them for weeks and weeks and weeks. So and paradoxically, they relieve stress as opposed to making stress. A department head came in and said, "Oh, Linda, I think we dropped this important ball, and it was really important." And I said, "Well, we got so many we're juggling, it's not a wonder we don't drop more." And so we were laughing, just kind of laughing about that. And then I left the office and I said, "Well, okay, what does an important ball look like? What does this look like?" And so I went down and bought all these broken things in one of the stores close by, orbs of all kinds, and I threw them out on my studio floor. This one I didn't even do any study sketches for it. It was just so clear to me that it needed to fall in somebody's lap. All these balls needed to just fall in your lap. And they were almost like bowling processes when I was setting them up. So how these 4-layer works are done is on the bottom is demarcated. My underdrawing demarcations are done with 8B graphite pencil, Stadler. I prefer that company. They've been there since the 1700s. They were the first company to put wood around pencil units. So I trust them. You know, they've been out there forever. So 8B Stadlers, and then the second layer I will resist off either with wax or tape. Anything that's white. And on this one you can see all these little small pieces right there. Those were all taped off, okay, to begin with. The ones that are harder to tape are all waxed off with paraffin wax. Then I do a little, see this is a resisted piece, okay. Then I watercolor them just a little bit so the wax will come out, you know, I can see the wax and see where the tape offs are. Then the next thing that I do is shade them with charcoal, and then all of the demarcation, or the top lines, all the top work, all the special work on it is also done with charcoal. At the end of that, I back up and I say, did you leave enough white at the bottom? Did you leave enough white there? Is it a third white, third gray, third blacks? And if it still lacks that, you know, it's actually a Greek idea, you know that, but we still live by it because we have to photograph things, and they photograph better if they're full range value. So we still go by that. But on the bottom part here, I felt like it was a little too dark. So all of these pieces then were done on the 4th level, all of these, and they're done with ink nib, Dr. Martin's Pen White ink on top of the whole thing. And I went back and did quite a bit more ink work on it, okay? So the last thing, or I guess this actually is 5 layers, is everything here was my studio rug. I have this big huge rug that's in my shop. And so all of that top work on that is done with white charcoal. So it's really difficult to see this thing unless you see it in person. Even the images and all kinds of digital images I have on the website and have out there, until you see the surfaces really close up, it's very difficult to appreciate the energy of the surfaces, the textural surfaces on them. Thank you very much for tuning in to my information about the Rose Center show. I want to stand in front of the Pit series because it's one of the ones that you're not going to be able to see or me talk about very much. But what it's about is being between 2 different points of view and being basically unable to figure out if you've gone up or down, whether or not you've done the right thing or the wrong thing. And there are lots of situations in our life history that's the case. When I moved to South Carolina, we had no idea whether we'd be doing a good thing or a bad thing by moving out of state. I was born in West Tennessee, 50-acre farm, so that was a little bit scary. And also doing art for all your life. Who knows why this pursuit? I'm just totally addicted to making things, I guess. So I hope that when you see this work and you start to look at it close up and start to appreciate it, that you will get on the website and give me send me an email. I will be more than pleased to talk to you more about any piece here.